The much-awaited Trump-Putin summit ends without a deal. President Trump says some headway was made during talks in Alaska, but no agreement was reached on the Russia-Ukraine conflict, while Putin called these talks constructive. Meanwhile, Trump claims his tariffs pushed India to halt Russian oil buys, saying Moscow lost a major client that once made up 40% of its oil trade. On secondary sanctions for India, he said they're not on the table right now, but could come in 2 to 3 weeks, adding that his meeting went very well. Wall Street eases off record highs. S&P and Nasdaq slip as chip stocks drag, while the Dow Jones that ekes out gains on all three still notch weekly advances on Fed rate cut hopes. Back home, D Street ended a 6-week losing streak with the Nifty over 1% higher. All sectors gained, with pharma leading the pack. In his address to the nation, the Prime Minister announced a double Diwali bonanza for the people of India, stating that the next generation of GST reforms will be rolled out soon by the end of this year. The Prime Minister also asserted that the government would never compromise on the interests of its farmers as they made the country self-sufficient. India would trade, keeping national interest in mind, he added. The statement comes amidst a stalemate over trade deal with the United States. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. You're watching News Now with me, Sumita Karir. And of course, let's take you through the big story of the day. Well, the high-stakes meeting between US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin, which concluded with no agreement to resolve Moscow's war in Ukraine after a nearly 3-hour summit in Alaska. In fact, in a joint statement, both the leaders claimed progress on the war, with Trump stating that many key points were agreed upon, with only a few still under discussion. In fact, he also announced his plans to speak with NATO leaders and the Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy in the coming few days. Meanwhile, the Russian president invited Trump to Moscow for further round of talks. Remember, the meeting comes amidst after, in fact, the president had warned of very severe consequences if Putin failed to move towards peace. In fact, let's listen into what the US President Trump had to say while he was addressing the joint press conference with Russian President Vladimir Putin in Alaska.
I believe we had a very productive meeting. There were many, many points that we agreed on, most of them, I would say, a couple of big ones that we haven't quite gotten there, but we've made some headway. So there's no deal until there's a deal. I will call up NATO in a little while. I will call up the various people that I think are appropriate, and I'll, of course, call up President Zelenskyy and tell him about today's meeting.
Well, and my colleague Srinjoy Chaudhary joins us now to get us the key takeaways from the Alaska summit. Srinjoy, take us the key points that you took out, the key takeaways for all the world which was watching that very, very crucial meeting between President Trump and President Putin.
President Trump and President Putin have met in Alaska. But as expected, there is no ceasefire, because this is not a particularly easy problem to solve. President Trump had said while he was campaigning that he would solve it in a day. It's 200 days since he became president. The point is, since the war started about 3 years ago, about 1 million people have been killed and wounded, both sides, Russian and Ukrainian, and also civilian, and the war is still continuing. There is also enormous damage in both countries, plus other countries, particularly the South countries, have been affected because in these 3 years, fuel prices have gone up, food grade prices have gone up, fertilizer prices have gone up, and there have been these problems India has with America, like this 50% tariff for buying Russian oil, which is comparatively cheaper. Now, what can happen now? Clearly, President Trump now realizes that there is no solution, there is no deal till the deal is done. There could be further meetings, there could be meetings with Zelenskyy, or at least a conversation, there could be meetings with the Europeans. But the moot point is that this is not a problem that is easy to solve. The Russians took the Ukraine by surprise in 2014 and took the Crimea. Then Russia currently controls Donetsk and Luhansk. Ukraine wants all these three back. Will Russia give these three areas back? Probably not. So if that happens, this is a problem that will be difficult to solve.
Absolutely, Shinjo. It remains to be seen what will follow next and how soon that meeting with President Zelensky that will happen. Meanwhile, ladies and